What was supposed to be a casual dive in the Gulf of Mexico quickly turned into an insane adventure for this local diver. He had ascended into deep oceans before and saw new things during every dive, but nothing like this. However, discovering this strange underwater building was just the start, because when he dove inside and learned what this building actually was, he was left speechless.
But before we start, smash the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our upcoming stories.
Eli Price had explored countless dive spots around the globe, but none as remote or thrilling as the central basin of the Gulf of Mexico. With decades of experience behind him and a private boat to himself, he enjoyed the peace of diving alone, the world above forgotten as he slipped beneath the surface in search of coral canyons and beautiful aquatic life. That morning, he had planned a casual dive, a relaxing break from his recent salvage work. He had scheduled a trip to the central part of the Gulf, a place that not many people dared to dive into. But to Eli, it was just the kind of place he was looking for. Untamed nature, unspoiled by human interaction, or at least so he thought. It would have made the perfect spot for some deep-water photography. Eli loved taking pictures of deep-water flora and fauna for his personal journal. He double-checked his gear, slipped into the water, and began the unknown descent to the bottom of the ocean. He breathed evenly as the sunlight faded above him and the green-blue haze of the water around him grew dark. At nearly 100 feet down, the ocean floor began to flatten out, revealing sweeping plains of sand broken only by ridged formations of rock and the occasional burst of sponge or sea fan. He coasted slowly along the bottom, letting the slow current drift him eastward. It was deeper than most recreational dives, but Eli had done much worse. He passed the usual schools of fish, watching from shadows, plus a lone barracuda gliding in the distance. But as he turned toward a rocky outcrop that seemed oddly uniform, his attention locked onto something unnatural. Just beyond the slope, a hard-edged shadow cut against the sandy bottom, too symmetrical to be natural, too buried to be a modern shipwreckage. Eli kicked forward, curiosity surging, brushing past a school of tiny jacks. The object ahead was much larger than he'd thought, about the size of a small building. What the hell? The question echoed in his mind as he swam closer. Covered in algae and coral, the structure had defined brick patterns and ridged concrete slabs, clearly man-made. Eli, an experienced diver, had never seen anything like it. He swept his hand along the east wall. It felt like aged stone or concrete. Thick sea life coated its surface, and faint carvings or intentional indentations hinted at something more. Shapes too precise to be natural. A strange chill crept down his spine as he hovered beside what appeared to be an entranceway, partially obscured by sediment. He tried to peek inside, but visibility was poor, almost a perfect darkness. His normal diving light wasn't going to cut through this blackness. Eli backed away, circling the structure slowly. This thing had been down here for a while. And even though Eli knew his history and the architecture in this area, the design of this underwater building was completely foreign to him. It looked like something between a Mesopotamian ziggurat and a wartime bunker, clearly built to last. During this analysis, he was already hyping himself up to go inside, but nobody could have prepared him for what he found inside. As he checked his dive watch, Eli realized he was pushing his limit. He hadn't come prepared for prolonged exposure at this depth, and curiosity had nearly gotten the better of him. He took one last look at the building, noting its outline carefully in his mind. Whatever it was, it had no business being there, and yet it stood, defiant. He began his ascent, bubbles trailing behind as the dark shape faded from view. Reaching his boat, Eli sat in silence for a moment, his heart still racing from the strange encounter. He knew he needed better gear, more time, maybe even a high-definition camera. But mostly, he needed to know what was inside that building. It consumed his mind. Eli leaned over the boat's edge and marked the coordinates on his dive slate and GPS. He double-checked the exact depth reading and water temperature before returning to the helm. With a final glance at the ripple on the surface, he turned the boat around and pushed the throttle hard toward home, where the rest of his gear was. It was a 2-hour trip back to the Marina, but Eli made it in just under 90 minutes. He moved like a man on a mission, darting through his equipment lockers and dive room with practiced urgency. Whatever was down there, he needed to be ready for anything. He wasn't going unprepared again. By mid-afternoon, Eli was back on the water, steering straight for the marked location. On board, he now had a reinforced dive suit, high-capacity oxygen tanks, a high-powered flashlight, and a mounted 4K camera rig. As the sun began to dip behind him, Eli dropped anchor at the exact coordinate. The water was calm, eerily still, as if holding its breath for him. He suited up quickly, checked his tank pressure, and clipped the flashlight and camera into place. With a deep breath and one last look around, he flipped overboard and began his descent. Eli's eagerness to dive again would later bring trouble. This time, he was better prepared, but diving alone at night in the open ocean carried risks. He'd left his satellite phone on the boat, unknowingly cutting himself off completely. But Eli wasn't thinking about danger, only discovery. As he descended, a grin spread across his face. The sea welcomed him like an old friend, and soon, the outline of the ancient structure emerged from the murk like a forgotten temple. He headed straight for the entrance, switching on his high-powered light and camera. Without hesitation, he crossed the threshold. Inside, the water grew darker and colder. The visible outer chamber was cramped and empty, a simple entry hall with layered stone walls. But Eli knew this wasn't all. What showed above, the seabed, was just a fragment. He floated through the narrow space, sweeping his light across the interior. Then he saw it, a perfectly circular hole in the floor, about a meter wide. Eli hovered above it, then adjusted his gear and slipped in feet first. The shaft walls were smooth, as if deliberately carved. 20 meters down, the tunnel suddenly opened into a much larger space. The darkness was still there, but this time, much less cramped. Eli steadied himself mid-water, spinning slowly as his flashlight cut through the gloom to reveal walls that kept going and going. His eyes widened behind the mask. The chamber around him was enormous, easily the size of a football field. He hovered in the middle of it, stunned by the scale, by the sheer size of what had remained hidden beneath the ocean floor for who knows how long. This was all down here and nobody knew? This is crazy. He turned slowly, taking in every angle of the massive room. Strange shapes loomed in the distance, barely illuminated by the edge of his beam. Eli hovered in the vast chamber, adjusting his camera. The stonework was ancient, no metal, bolts, or beams, just interlocking blocks of pale rock, worn smooth by time. Whoever built it understood structure and alignment. The cracked floor beneath him was still remarkably even. At the far end, a raised platform caught his eye, rectangular, unmarked, with worn grooves at its base. To the left, a stacked stone passage led into a narrow corridor. The walls closed in, and the darker, more porous stone gave Eli a sense of unease. If anything collapsed, there'd be no way out. The corridor opened into a smaller room with stone benches lining the walls. Opposite them stood a long slab with grooves, some kind of ancient work table, perhaps. Ritual site? Eli couldn't decide. At the far corner, he discovered an overturned container carved from a single block of stone, its lid broken so he could look inside. He held his light close and stared in disbelief. Flint blades, tools, bone fragments shaped into handles or grips, all were perfectly preserved. He filmed every angle, realizing that what he saw was of great historical significance. The tools looked almost prehistoric, but Eli didn't know how accurate that assumption was yet. Eli moved to a third space, descending a few meters through a sloped passage. It led to a circular chamber, domed and simple. The floor had buckled inward slightly, and through a crack in the wall he could see sand pouring in slowly. Along the lower edge of the chamber, he spotted a long split in the wall. Above it, faint streaks filled the ceiling, branching like spider webs. Ice fracturing? Maybe, he frowned. How could ice be present in the Gulf of Mexico? This place was known for its hot temperature, but it would turn out that there was more to this story than Eli thought. Eventually, the passage opened into the largest room yet. The ceiling arched impossibly high, supported by massive stone pillars, and that's when he saw it. The unmistakable contour of the building's main foundation. But there was a problem. Eli expected to see concrete flooring here, but there was nothing, as if whatever this building rested upon years ago had vanished completely. Again, Eli spotted the leftover remnants of ice, just as there were on the ceiling a couple of rooms ago. Did this entire building rest on a giant ice sheet in the middle of the Gulf? The theory sounded too fantastical to be true, but Eli captured the sightings anyway. Maybe experts on the mainland could say something useful about it. Suddenly, a dull beep echoed in his ears. His oxygen monitor. Low pressure. His tank was nearly depleted. Panic struck him like a cold wave. He'd unknowingly spent too long in the maze of this structure. Time had melted away in the ruin. His chest-mounted camera kept rolling, capturing every shaky breath as he bolted back the way he came. His light bobbed wildly, each hallway unfamiliar in reverse. Dust swirled around him, the collapsed chamber, the tunnel bend, the raised platform. He passed them all, lungs tightening as the warning beep quickened. Panic bloomed in his muscles. He pushed forward, scanning for the shaft. His vision blurred. Then, there, the tunnel leading up. He grabbed the stone lip and pulled himself in, kicking hard, arms tucked. His chest burned. He saw the upper chamber flash past, then green daylight. Eli kicked the final meters, eyes wide. Then, he burst into the open sea, ripped off his mask, and gasped. He clambered onto his boat, coughing and laughing through exhaustion. The sun hung lower now, waves rocked gently. Eli collapsed, chest heaving. But one thought rang clear. I found it. Whatever it was, and his camera had caught it all. The moment he reached land, he headed straight for an old contact. Dr. Marcus Helling, a coastal geologist and anthropologist. He handed over the footage. Marcus expected a typical deep-sea curiosity. But 20 minutes in, his demeanor changed completely. The images revealed something ancient, far beyond known history. Marcus identified ice fracture lines, a foundational void, and primitive tools. The structure wasn't a shipwreck or modern ruin, it was over 20,000 years old, dating back to the final stages of the last ice age. At that time, the Gulf region had been covered in thick ice sheets, with much lower sea levels. This civilization had built directly on the ice. When it melted, their entire world sank beneath the sea. The sand and currents had preserved it for millennia, hidden in plain sight. What Eli discovered wasn't just a structure, it was evidence of an unknown civilization. The footage was quietly sent to experts, glaciologists, marine geologists, tool analysts. Their preliminary reports confirmed everything: the construction methods, erosion patterns, even bones and materials matched prehistoric origin. But the precision and scale pointed to a civilization far more advanced than anyone expected. The site's location was kept classified as preparations for a major dive began. Eli watched from the docks as submersibles and research gear were loaded. Divers, archaeologists, and engineers assembled, using his footage as a guide. What they found confirmed it all: advanced tools, chamber layouts, stone joints without mortar, and clear signs of intentional design. This wasn't a primitive settlement, it was a sophisticated society, lost to time. News spread quickly. Headlines dubbed them the ice builders of the Gulf. Eli hadn't meant to make history, but his footage became the first chapter in a new understanding of human civilization. One morning, he returned to the shore, gazing out at the waves. Somewhere beneath them, the ruins remained. What began as a solo dive had become a discovery that changed everything, and Eli's name would be tied to it forever.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another unbelievable tale like this one.